This is the story of a little girl. Here she is with her mom's parakeet on her finger. And what you don't know about in this picture is this little girl really believed that her mama liked that parakeet better than her. She really thought so because she got yelled at a lot. And she had a problem. Her problem was that she was a bedwetter. This little girl also had some other things going on for her that weren't so fun. She was really, really cross-eyed. This is her in her school picture front on, one of the worst ones. Her mama never bought those. They were really bad. It was always a nightmare whenever it was school pictures because the angle just had to be right. But one eye went up because the little girl couldn't see out of it, and the other one went in. So, about this little girl. When she was very young, she'd been told by her family, by her mama and her daddy, that God wrote down everything that she did. So this little girl sometimes would be very quiet just to cut the good Lord a break so he could put that pencil down. And she was told never to take the biggest cookie and always to think of others first. And she did that. She was a really good girl. But the problem with her was the bedwetting. No matter what she did, when she went to bed at night, she was scared because she just knew she was going to wet the bed and she didn't want to. And she knew when she did, her parents would be very, very angry. And your parents also fought a lot. So whenever something came down and they were irritated, she usually got the bad end of it. So when she went to school, sometimes kids would tease her and she'd never know when that was going to happen. And that made her feel bad. And then at home, she was wetting the bed and she always got yelled at and even cussed out at times. And that made her feel bad. So she didn't feel like she was very good. She just wasn't quite up to what we call snuff, with the family. Well, when this little girl was 6.5, when she was just the age that she is in this picture, she woke up in her little cot. She lived in a one bedroom cottage. It was very small. And there was a walk-through closet to the bathroom. And that was like a little tiny alcove. And that was her bedroom. And she was on a rollaway cot. And one night she woke up on her rollaway cot. And sure enough, she was soaked. And she'd wet the bed again. And she just was so scared because oh no, oh no, oh no. And she took off her wet clothes and put on some dry underwear. And she would have to go get in bed with her parents because her bed, she couldn't be in her bed and there was no other place to go. So she went in her parents' room and she got between them in the bed and was very, very quiet not to wake them up. And she put her little arms very close by her side to try to make herself as small as she could. And just was looking up at the ceiling. And then she turned to look to the side. And she couldn't believe what she saw because what she saw was Jesus standing there smiling at her. Well, she thought it was Jesus. It looked like it must be Jesus. He was in a beautiful white robe, and she didn't know the word iridescent. But in the 50s, on black and white TV, they had a Tide commercial. And they always had the clothes that were washed in Tide glowing and radiating and looking what the word would be iridescent white. All she knew was his robe was whiter than white, and he was just smiling at her. Now, this little girl had been told by her mother that nobody sees the Easter Bunny, nobody sees Santa Claus, and nobody sees Jesus. And her little boys and girlfriends that had been told stories of the Virgin Mary appearing or Jesus or whatever, that was all made up. It wasn't true. Nobody sees them. So when she looked and she saw Jesus, she thought she was seeing something she was forbidden to see. And instead of feeling wonderful and happy because he was just smiling at her, and he looked at her with so much love, and she knew his feet didn't touch the floor. She couldn't see his feet, but she knew he was just high enough that his feet weren't touching the floor. But he was just smiling at her, and she didn't know what it meant, but she knew she had done something wrong by seeing him, because her mom said nobody sees him, and there he was. So she looked back up at the ceiling, and she told herself she wasn't seeing Jesus. He really wasn't there. And she looked over again at him, and sure enough, he was still there. And so she looked at the ceiling, and she just kind of floated into herself and just passed out into a deep, deep sleep. Now, the little girl told her mom about what she'd seen, and of course, her mom said she was dreaming. She hadn't been to Sunday school for a couple years. Her parents stopped taking her. She wasn't thinking about Jesus when she went in that bed. She didn't know why Jesus appeared, but he did. So the thing was, she knew she had seen him, but her parents said no, she hadn't. So it kind of stayed that way. The little girl wondered, was she going to die? She wondered, did this mean it was the halfway time in her life? She was thinking, 6 and 6, am I going to die when I'm 12? All kinds of thoughts went through her head. But she just knew she saw Jesus, and that was all she knew. Meanwhile, many years passed. The little girl grew up, and she lived a lot of life, and she saw a lot of life, and she started to learn things other than what she was told about, many prejudices, many things that were taught bigotry in an age, with a family. And she one day was talking with one of her pastors, and she said, I wondered what it meant. But finally, when she was in her 30s, it took that long, she knew what that was about when Jesus came and smiled at her. And what it was about was that even though she had eyes that were very badly crossed, even though she wet the bed and her parents cursed at her and yelled at her and were angry, that she was still loved very, very much, just the way she was, and that Jesus found her very pleasing in his sight, and that her heart was very, very pure. And it is really sad what children go through, what they're led to believe, and what we are even led to believe as adults about ourselves. And that, the Lord does love us. He just loves us because we are his children, and he sees our hearts. And I just wanted to share this story because there's other little kids out there just like this one. Something I learned recently too, bedwetting is just, it's so humiliating, and it can be inherited, and sometimes there'll be a child that will have it in the family and another one won't. But I found out when I was in my late 50s that my mom wet the bed until she was 9 years old. She never told me that. And she was so angry with me. And, I probably just had that passed down from her. But she said, Jenny, it was so hard, to wash the sheets, and they usually didn't. They just dried them out. But, they got washed once a week, and that was it. And she said it was just so frustrating. So, yeah, it was annoying. We'd get angry. But when she let me know that, I thought, oh my goodness, why didn't you tell me that when I was little? Why didn't you share that openness about yourself and free me up some? There's really nothing to be ashamed about. It's just the way it is. But I did find out from a nurse recently that a lot of times if you give a child, now this would be a child about the age I was, it wouldn't be an infant or anything, but if you give a child a spoonful of honey at night, sometimes it will help them so that they don't wet the bed. I don't know, the honey does something in the system with fluids or whatever. So I'm just passing that on. And I wanted to share this story and just ask anybody that has a bedwetter to, for Pete's sakes, put down a rubber sheet, and to help them out. And even if you have to get pull-ups or something, they didn't have those back in the day. But, give the kid a break, because nobody sits there and does that on purpose. And thank you for letting me share.